It happens on a Tuesday in November, in the middle of something ordinary, the way all life-changing things do. Jae-won is being driven back from a meeting that resolved nothing, his mood a dark thing that promises suffering to whoever speaks to him first. When the car slows at a red light on a street he never usually travels. Out of habit he looks to the window. He's always watching, always cataloging. And that is when he sees the boy. Small, 4 years old maybe, pressed flat against the wall of a closed laundromat with a paper cup cradled in both hands. Round-faced, dark-skinned, wearing a jacket, bought with room to grow into clearly by someone who planned ahead, someone who loved him. Jae-won is about to look away. He has looked away from worse. Then the boy tilts his chin up, and Jae-won, who has not felt fear in longer than he can remember, who has sat across tables from men who wanted him dead and felt nothing but cold arithmetic, feels the ground vanish beneath him completely. Because the boy has his jaw, the exact line and angle of it. The sharp particular set that his mother always said came from his grandfather, from generations of stubborn men who held their faces like weapons, and the boy holds his the same way, chin lifted slightly even while his hands cup something asking, and the eyes, wider in that rounder face, are the same in a way that transcends resemblance. They couldn't be related. More so his son. The doctor said he was infertile. So how? This is not a coincidence. Stop the car. His driver doesn't hesitate. Jae-won steps out into the rain and walks toward the boy slowly, the way you approach something you're afraid to startle. He crouches to eye level and looks at the boy properly, and his mind, trained to work quickly and without visible disturbance, begins to move. 3 doctors, 2 countries. The same verdict each time, delivered to a man who filed it away and never spoke of it again. Because in his world, an unlocked door is an invitation. And yet, he looks at the jaw, the chin, the eyes that are his own eyes, wider in a rounder face but unmistakably, structurally his. He turns over every name he can think of and arrives with the only answer that makes sense. Nancy, the daughter of his mother's housekeeper. The only person who had ever moved through his house without wanting something from him. The girl he had not meant to love and had loved completely, and had lost 5 years ago to a disappearance so clean it had to have been deliberate. He had looked. He had found nothing. He had learned the particular shape of her absence and carried it ever since. She'd been pregnant when she ran. He hadn't known. He looks at his son, and feels every wall he has ever built come loose at once. "What's your name?" he asks. The boy looks at him with no fear whatsoever. Just calm, direct assessment, the expression of a small person who has already learned to read rooms. "Eli," he says, "my mom said wait here, so I'm waiting." "Where did your mom go?" "To talk to the man about the money." Eli says it plainly, without shame, the way children state facts before they understand that some facts are meant to be hidden. "She said 10 minutes. Jae-won's gaze drops to the cup. "Were you—" "Yes," Eli says with a gravity that is almost heartbreaking in a 4-year-old. "Well, I was just holding it, in case." Jae-won stares at him. The thing happening in his chest does not stop. It is seismic and patient. "Okay," he says, "I'll wait with you." Eli considers this with the seriousness of a diplomat weighing terms, then nods. Permission granted. So they wait together. Nancy stops half a block away the instant she sees him. She knows him before she can justify how. She knows the exact shape of him, the particular stillness he carries like a physical property, the way his presence organizes the space around it. She has known the shape of him for 5 years, through nightmares and through dreams she was ashamed of, through every quiet moment she ever spent trying to forget. She knows him the way you know something that has never stopped living in your body. Her legs make the decision. She turns. "Mom," Eli's voice, bright and effortless, "this man waited with me." She goes still. Eli has seen her. Running now means her son watches her run. She has spent 4 years ensuring Eli never sees her afraid of anything. Not debt collectors, not dark streets, not the particular silence of rooms that feel wrong. She will not let it start now. She turns back. She walks forward. Each step is a choice she makes against her own body. Jae-won straightens slowly as she approaches. He watches her with an expression she never let herself imagine. Not cold, not calculating, not the controlled fury she spent years preparing for. Something open and unguarded that is almost harder to face than anger would have been. Nancy, just her name. Quiet. like he has been keeping it somewhere careful for a long time. Eli, she takes her son's hand without breaking eye contact. We need to go. He stood with me, Mom. I know, baby. That was nice of him. I know. Jawan does not move, does not reach for her, does not step into her path. He only says, low enough that only she can hear it, I'm not here to hurt you. I only want to understand. She laughs. It comes out wrong, sharp and serrated, not quite the sound she intended. You don't know what I saw, she says. Her voice is steady. She holds on to that. Whatever you saw, he says. I don't think you saw all of it. She goes. He lets her. She does not look back. She will not give him that. He has her address within the hour, passed to him through channels that never fail. He sits in the car outside in the dark for a long time, hands still, engine running, looking at the building where a light is on in a second-floor window. Then he drives away, for now. The next morning, Nancy is not surprised when he knocks. She is surprised that he knocks at all, rather than simply walking through the door like he owns everything, which, in most parts of the city, he does. She opens it with the chain on. Through the gap, he looks past her into the apartment, what little he can see of it, small, clean but worn in the particular way that comes from not being able to fix things when they break. A child's drawings taped along the wall with the careful pride of a mother who doesn't have frames, but refuses to let that be the end of it. I want to know him, Jawan says. Tell me what it would take. Nothing, she says. There is nothing it would take. We're fine. Nancy, we're fine. She closes the door. He comes back the next day, and the day after. He does not push, does not raise his voice, does not leverage the considerable weight of everything he is and everything he could do. He simply returns, knocks, and when the chain stays on or the door doesn't open at all, he leaves, like a man with patience enough to outlast her, which, she suspects, he is. On the fourth day, Eli hears his voice through the door. She feels her son's small body coiling beside her legs before she can stop it, that 4-year-old momentum that has no interest in complicated history or the reasons adults keep their doors mostly closed. Eli has decided something, and a 4-year-old's conviction is its own immovable force. 5 minutes, she tells Jawan when she opens the door. It is not an invitation. It is an exhausted ceasefire, and they both know the difference. Jawan sits on her apartment floor. Within 3 minutes, Eli is climbing him, scaling him completely with the fearless certainty of a child who has never yet met a body that wasn't available to him as furniture. Jawan, the man who has made rooms full of armed men go quiet with nothing but a look, goes still and lets it happen. He adjusts only once, a small shift of his arm to make sure Eli doesn't fall. Nancy watches from the kitchen doorway and feels something move in her chest, tectonic and unwelcome. She looks away before it can settle into anything with a name. The eviction notice has been on her kitchen table for 11 days, 2 months behind. Her landlord, a patient man, an old man, a man Eli once charmed at age 3 by fixing his cigarette lighter with a paperclip, who has always found them endearing, has reached the limit of what patience can carry. She understands. She does not blame him. Understanding and not blaming don't change the number at the bottom of the notice. She had a job. Cashier at a grocery store. Steady, enough. Then the store closed its doors, and enough became nothing. She has applications out. She has 2 interviews pending for next week. She is not a woman who surrenders. She has never been that woman, has worn her refusal to give up like a second skin through. 4 years of raising Eli alone in a city that offers very little softness to women in her position. But November rent is in 6 days, and she has $43. She does not tell Jawan this. She would not tell Jawan this if he were the last person left on the earth with anything to give, Eli tells him. Not deliberately, just in the way children narrate their lives without yet understanding which parts are meant to be kept inside. We might have to move again, Eli mentions cheerfully, stacking blocks on Jawan's knee with the focused industry of a small architect. Mom's worried about the letter. The silence afterward is very short. Jawan doesn't look at her. He keeps his eyes on Eli and asks in the tone of someone just making conversation, "Where would you go?" "I don't know," Eli says. "Mom says we'll figure it out." He places another block, steady-handed. "We always figure it out." "Yeah," Jawan says quietly. "I believe that." He leaves without saying a word to her about it. The next morning there is a bag of groceries outside her door. No note, no card, Just groceries, carefully chosen, and sitting on top, a box of the exact cereal she'd heard Eli mention 2 days ago that he wished they had. She had said nothing when Eli said it. She'd filed it away in the long mental list of things she was working toward. Jae-won had been sitting on the floor 3 feet away, and she hadn't thought he was listening. She stands in the hallway in her socks, holding the cereal box for a long time. Then, she brings it inside. She doesn't say thank you because thank you would mean acknowledging it, and acknowledging it would mean letting it be something. But she brings it inside and puts it in the cabinet where Eli will see it in the morning, and she stands in her kitchen in the dark for a while before she goes to bed. 2 days after that, an envelope appears under her door. Inside, enough cash for 2 months of rent. Nothing else. No note, no list of conditions, no inventory of what she now owes him. No strings written anywhere, because he is intelligent enough to know that written strings would send the money back the same way it came. She sits at her kitchen table for 40 minutes. She looks at the envelope. She looks at the eviction notice beside it. She looks at Eli's drawings covering the wall, 40-something of them, a whole life in crayon, a life she has bled for and fought for and rearranged herself entirely to protect. She puts the money in her pocket. It is not a surrender, she tells herself. It is a mother making the only available choice, and those are different things. She is precise about this distinction, deliberate, because she cannot afford any confusion about what she is doing and what it does or does not mean. She puts the eviction notice in the recycling. She does not sleep well. He comes every other day. She does not invite him, but she stops not inviting him, and in practice, the difference is invisible. She watches him with Eli the way she watches everything that matters, carefully, with patience, looking for the angle, waiting for the moment it tips into something else. The moment he lets something slip. The moment it becomes about what he wants rather than what Eli needs. She is a woman who has survived by seeing things clearly, and she brings all of that to bear on him every visit. The moment doesn't come. He is simply there, present in the particular way Eli seems to require, inexhaustible with the questions, genuinely absorbed by the block towers and the crayon drawings and the long, solemn debates about which dinosaurs could defeat which other dinosaurs under what specific conditions. He never performs patience. He just has it. And Eli, who is a child of considerable instinct, has decided that Jae-won is trustworthy, and Eli is rarely wrong about people. He's good with him, she admits to herself at night, alone, when honesty costs her nothing. She doesn't say it out loud. Out loud, she is still watching, still waiting for the angle that hasn't appeared yet. She notices other things against her will because she has never been able to stop noticing. He comes alone. Every time, no security, no quiet men waiting in cars at the curb, no entourage arranged at a respectful distance. Just him. She knows enough about his world, has held enough of its edges, to understand what that exposure costs a man like him. What it says that he pays it, without comment, without asking her to acknowledge it. He never raises the past, never pushes toward the conversation she can feel suspended between them at all times, present as weather. He seems to have made a decision that she will come to it on her own terms, and that, if she doesn't, she doesn't. And either way, he will keep showing up every other day and sitting on her floor and letting her son climb him like furniture. One afternoon, he fixes her kitchen tap. She had mentioned it to Eli. Not to Jae-won, to Eli in passing, that the dripping was keeping her up at night. On his next visit, Jae-won arrived with tools. He fixed it in 20 minutes while Eli stood beside him, offering opinions and handing him the wrong instruments with total confidence. When it was done, Jae-won washed his hands at the sink he had just repaired and went back to the living room floor like nothing worth noting had occurred. She left the room because she needed somewhere to put her face. "Can I ask you something?" It is evening. Eli is asleep. Jae-won is on his way out, and the question surprises her as much as it surprises him. She wasn't planning to ask it tonight, wasn't sure she was planning to ask it ever, but there it is, already out, already in the air between them. He stops, turns, waits. "You believed you couldn't have children," she says. She had heard this once years ago from her mother who cleaned his house, who moved through the edges of his world, with the invisibility of good domestic staff and who heard more than she was meant to. "That's what you thought." Something crosses his face, there and gone. "Yes." "So when I left, It never crossed your mind that, no. The word is quiet and absolute. It didn't occur to me. I didn't think it was possible. He pauses. I didn't know you were pregnant, Nancy. I know, she says. I know you didn't. They stand and look at each other, and 5 years presses into the space between them. All the things that happened and all the things that didn't, all the versions of this life that could have existed and don't, and all the weight of choices made in the dark without full information. Tell me what you saw that night, he says. Quietly, like a man who has been waiting a long time to ask and has finally decided he can. Tell me exactly. So she does. She tells him all of it. The warehouse, the doorway she wasn't supposed to be near, the single nod she watched him give, and what came after, and the sound she has never been able to fully unhear. She tells him about the running, how she ran and kept running and didn't stop for 5 years. She tells him everything, plainly, because she is too tired to arrange it into something softer. He listens without moving. When she finishes, the apartment holds its breath. His name was Dae Jung, Jae-hwan says. He was hired 4 days before that night. Someone in my organization had decided you were a liability, that I had gotten too close to you, that you knew too much just by proximity. He doesn't soften it. She watches him choose not to and understands it as the respect it is. I found out the day before. I handled it before he could reach you. Nancy stares at him. The man I watched you was there to kill you, he says. Yes. The silence that follows is different from any silence that has come before it. It is enormous. It is a silence that rearranges things, the kind that comes after an earthquake, when the ground has gone still, but you haven't yet taken inventory of what's standing and what isn't. I went back to the residence that same night, Jae-won continues. You were already gone. Your mother told me she didn't know where you were. A pause that costs him something. She was lying. She knew. She was protecting you, and she decided I was something to protect you from. Nancy closes her eyes. Her mother, who cleaned his floors and understood his world better than Nancy ever had. Who made a decision in a single conversation, alone with a man who came looking and who carried that decision to her grave. 8 months later, while Nancy was in a city that didn't know her name, unable to come home, grieving in a studio apartment with a newborn sleeping on her chest and no one to call. Her mother had known. Her mother had chosen. She doesn't know yet what to do with that. I spent 5 years looking for you, Jae-won says. Not to bring you back, I just needed to know you were alive, that you were okay. She opens her eyes. We weren't okay, she says, and it fractures on the way out, breaks open in a way she didn't intend and can't take back. We really weren't okay, Jae-won. He takes a step toward her, stops himself. She looks at his hands and notices they are not entirely still. I know, he says. I know that now. He says it like a man holding something he understands he is not allowed to put down. The world I was living in, that any of that was even possible. I'm sorry. For all of it. The apartment is very quiet. She doesn't say anything, but she doesn't ask him to leave. Jae-won's world was never going to stay neatly outside her door. She should have known that. She did know that in the part of herself that has always been clearer-eyed than comfortable. His mother finds out about Eli first, through the invisible infrastructure that powerful families run on, the quiet attentiveness of staff and associates who understand that noticing things is its own form of currency. Madame O is at her son's residence within 24 hours, and what follows is not quiet. A child. Outside of marriage, with a woman no one in his orbit knew existed. Not Korean, not connected, not vetted, not positioned in any way that maps onto the O family's architecture of alliances. And a mixed-race boy who is apparently the heir to the O name, whether anyone designed it that way or not. You will handle this properly, his mother says. I intend to, he says. That means, I know what it means to me, he says. That's the only meaning I'm interested in. His mother studies him for a long time. She's a sharp woman, sharp enough to recognize that her son is not negotiating, that the space he is occupying in this conversation is not one he intends to vacate, and she is sharp enough, underneath all the strategy and all the politics, to see something in his face she hasn't seen in years, something that looks like a man who has found the thing he's been missing and has no intention of being argued out of it. She leaves without winning. For Madame O, that is as close to a concession as the vocabulary allows. His sister Suyeon reacts, predictably, as though she's been waiting for this. I knew it, she says, before he has finished explaining. I knew there was someone. You've been strange about it for years. I haven't been strange. Jae-won, you kept a drawer of her things for 5 years. That's not... He stops. You went through my things. I'm your sister. It doesn't count. She grabs his arm with both hands. Tell me about her. Tell me about the boy. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out. Suyeon becomes, unexpectedly, his greatest ally. He hadn't anticipated that, but he should have. Nancy's world complicates too, though from a different direction. The aunt she once called from a city that didn't know her name, who told her, in the tone of someone delivering wisdom, that she had made her bed, hears through the family network that Nancy has resurfaced, that there is a man involved, that the man has money, that circumstances, broadly speaking, have shifted. She calls. She is warm in the careful way of people who have practiced warmth as a tool, deploying it when the conditions seem favorable. Nancy listens to 3 minutes of it and ends the call, the cousin who went quiet when things were hard texts to say she's been thinking about her lately. Another follows within the week. People who were not present when she needed presence begin materializing now that she needs them considerably less, drawn in by the rumor of changed circumstances, offering belated warmth with the confidence of those who don't expect to be held accountable for their absence. She doesn't have the energy for bitterness. She files it where she files things she can't use and focuses on what's in front of her. What's in front of her, increasingly, is Jae-won. He is different than she remembered. Or she is beginning to understand that he has been changing, quietly and without announcement, for longer than she has been back in his life. He mentions a therapist once, casually, dropping it into conversation without apparent awareness of what it will do to her, and she is so thoroughly unprepared that she makes him repeat himself. You see a therapist. Every 2 weeks. Since when? 8 months ago. She tries to construct the image, the most controlled man she has ever known, the man who has held entire rooms with nothing but stillness, sitting in a chair in someone's office and admitting that something inside him requires attention. She tries to build the image and finds it not as impossible as she would have once. Does it help? She asks. He considers this with the honesty she's come to expect from him, turning the question over before he answers it. It's uncomfortable, he says. So probably yes. She almost smiles. She catches it before it completes, but it's a near thing. She gets a job. Office management at a logistics company, found through her own applications, her own interviews, her own competence walking into a room and being sufficient. It has nothing to do with him, and she tells him so when she tells him, with more satisfaction in her voice than she strictly intended to reveal. He smiles. Not the careful, managed expression she remembers from before, but something easier. I didn't expect anything less, he says, and it is somehow precisely the right response, not praise exactly, just recognition, just the acknowledgement that this outcome was always a matter of time. She starts to breathe differently, like someone who has been braced for a collision for 5 years and is only now, incrementally, allowing her body to believe it might not be coming. Eli thrives. He is beginning to understand, in the wordless, intuitive way of children, that the man who comes every other day is something more than a visitor. He has started calling him Jay without anyone suggesting it. He saves things specifically to show him, drawings, interestingly shaped rocks collected on the walk home from the park, developing theories about prehistoric predators. He treats Jae-won's lap as a natural extension of available seating. One afternoon, Eli falls asleep on the couch against Jae-won's side, sudden and total in the way children drop into sleep, and Jae-won goes completely still. He sits there for an hour without moving, without reaching for his phone, without doing anything at all except staying exactly where he is so the boy doesn't wake. Nancy watches from the kitchen doorway for a long time. She understands, standing there, that she is in serious trouble, that she has perhaps been in serious trouble for longer than she has been willing to name it. The understanding arrives not as panic, but as something quieter and more resigned. The feeling of seeing clearly something you have been almost seeing for weeks. She goes back to making dinner. She doesn't know yet what she's going to do about it, but she stops pretending she doesn't know it's there. It is Eli who says it first, because Eli has never once in his 4 years of life learned to wait for the right moment, or understood why such a thing would be necessary. It is an ordinary Saturday morning. Cartoons finished, cereal poured, sunlight coming through the kitchen window at the low winter angle that makes everything look like it's been gilded. Eli is at the table with his spoon raised and his expression that of a person following a train of thought to its logical destination, which is always, with Eli, exactly where you least expect to end up. "Are you going to be my dad?" he asks Jaewon, completely conversational, spoon still mid-air. Jaewon goes very still. Nancy, at the counter with her back to both of them, stops breathing. She does not turn. Around. She stares at the cabinet in front of her and waits. "What makes you ask that?" Jaewon says. His voice is careful in the way of a man navigating unfamiliar ground with full awareness of what a wrong step costs. Eli considers the question fairly, as though it hadn't occurred to him that the answer was anything other than obvious. "You look like me," he says with the devastating simplicity of a 4-year-old who has not yet learned that some observations are supposed to stay interior. "And you look at my mom the way Marcus's dad looks at Marcus's mom." He takes a bite of cereal and chews. "And you're always here." He swallows. "So I was just wondering." The kitchen holds the sentence in the air like something suspended. Nancy has still not moved. She's aware of her own heartbeat in a way she isn't usually, aware of the specific quality of the silence behind her. Jaewon's silence, which she has learned to read like a language. "That's a conversation for me and your mom," Jaewon says finally. Still careful, still even. "But I want you to know something, Eli. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere, okay?" Eli receives this information, weighs it, and finds it satisfactory. He nods once, the decisive nod of a small person whose question has been sufficiently answered, and returns to his cereal with the complete equanimity of a child who has never learned to find the enormous things alarming. Nancy turns back to the counter. She stares at the wall. She does not say anything for a long time, and neither does he, and the kitchen continues its ordinary Saturday morning around all three of them, as though nothing has shifted. Something has shifted. That night, after Eli is asleep, she finds Jaewon in the hallway putting on his coat to leave. She has been thinking all day. She has been thinking since this morning, and she's come to the end of whatever process she needed to complete, and the end of it has brought her here, to the hallway, before she can talk herself out of it. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she says. He turns. "I needed you to know that. It took longer than I expected, and I'm telling you now, I'm not afraid of you." He watches her. He doesn't fill the space with reassurance or with anything at all. He just watches and waits and lets her have the room. "I'm afraid of this," she says. She keeps her voice level, which costs her something, of wanting something and then watching it disappear. "I've lost so much. My mother. Years of my own life that I spent surviving instead of living. I've been so careful, so deliberate, about not wanting things I can't keep." She pauses. "It became a habit, not wanting things too much, not letting myself count on anything I couldn't carry alone." "Nancy, I'm not finished." He closes his mouth. "I notice things about you," she says. "I've been trying not to. I notice them anyway. The way you are with him, not performing. It not trying, just actually present with him in a way I don't think you can manufacture." She looks at him steadily. "The way you have never once in all of this made me feel like I owe you anything for it. No ledger, no debt implied." A pause. The tap. The way you fixed it and didn't make it mean something. He says nothing. He has always known when words would cost more than silence. "The therapist," she says. "That one surprised me more than I expected." Something moves at the corner of his mouth, almost. "I don't need saving," she says, and her voice firms here, because this is the part that matters most, the part she needs to get exactly right. "I need you to understand that as a foundational fact and not as something I'll eventually soften on. I saved myself. I saved my son. We got here by ourselves, through things I would not wish on anyone, and I am not ashamed of a single choice I made to get us here." "I know," he says, quietly and without qualification. "I know you did. I have never thought otherwise. But I am," she says, and her voice does something on the last word, dips into a register she has kept sealed for a long time. Very tired of doing everything alone. He crosses the hallway in 2 steps and stops directly in front of her. Close enough that she has to tilt her chin up to meet his eyes, that same angle, that same particular line that she sees every morning in her son's face. He doesn't touch her. His hands stay at his sides. He waits with the patience of a man who has learned, at significant cost, that waiting is the only thing that has ever actually worked. She reaches up and puts her hand against his face. His eyes close. The breath he releases is slow and unsteady, the breath of a man setting down something that has been heavy for years. Under her palm, she can feel the tension in his jaw ease, incrementally, like ice yielding. He reaches up and covers her hand with his, holds it there. They stand in the hallway of her small apartment while Eli sleeps in the next room, and the city runs its indifferent course outside. And the thing that has been moving toward this moment for 5 years, through running and hiding and knocking and waiting and tap repairs and cereal boxes and a small boy who asks the questions no one else will, arrives, finally, where it was always going. She doesn't move her hand. He doesn't let go. His mother comes to the apartment on a Thursday while Jae-won is across the city in a meeting he didn't invite her to and doesn't know she's skipped. Nancy opens the door to find a small, immaculate Korean woman in her 60s standing in the hallway with the focused stillness of someone who has spent a lifetime being the most formidable person in any room she enters. She's looking at Nancy with the careful, total attention of an appraisal being conducted. "May I come in?" Madame O says. The inflection does not rise at the end. Nancy steps back and opens the door wider, because she has not survived 5 years alone in an indifferent city by flinching from difficult women. She recognizes the type. She has learned, at considerable cost, how to stand inside the attention of powerful people without rearranging herself. They sit across from each other at the small kitchen table. Eli is at a neighbor's. The apartment, which has started to feel like something approaching home, has never felt smaller. Madame O does not look around the apartment with the pointed assessment of someone cataloging inadequacy. She looks around it the way a precise person gathers information, noting the child's drawings covering the wall, the repaired tap, the cereal box on the counter. Reading the room the way powerful women read rooms, which is to say completely and without appearing to. "I want to understand what you want," she says. "I want my son to be okay," Nancy says. "That's what I've always wanted. That's the entire list." "And my son?" Nancy holds her gaze. That's more complicated." Something moves in Madame O's expression. Not warmth, precisely. Something more austere than warmth, the particular look of a person who has encountered an answer that was more honest than they expected and has adjusted their estimation accordingly. "He spent 5 years looking for you," she says. "He believed he was looking for answers, closure, some accounting of what happened." A brief pause. "I knew better. Mothers generally do." She folds her hands on the table with the composure of a woman who has never once needed to occupy her hands to feel settled. "He is not an easy man." "I know what he is," Nancy says. "He is changing what he is," Madame O says. Slowly, not always successfully. "I don't tell you this because I approve of all of it. I don't, and I won't pretend otherwise. I tell you because it is true, and because you are clearly a woman who makes better decisions when she has accurate information." She looks at the drawings on the wall for a moment. "My grandson will want for nothing. I can promise you that regardless of what you decide about everything else, what you decide about everything else is between you and my son. I have no interest in inserting myself into that question." She stands, smooths her jacket. The meeting, apparently, is concluded. "You've done well by him," she says, "and it is not quite warm, but it is not nothing. Raising him alone, you've done well." Then she leaves, and the apartment reassembles itself around the space she occupied, and Nancy sits at the kitchen table for a long time in the quiet. When Jae-won arrives that afternoon, she doesn't tell him his mother came. She's still thinking about it. She thinks about it for days. The specific gravity of the visit, the things that were said and the things that were deliberately left unsaid, the way Madame O had looked at Eli's drawings on the wall with something she hadn't bothered to conceal. There is also the matter of her safety. The man who was sent to kill her is long gone, handled years ago in whatever manner Jae-won handles things that threaten what belongs to him. But she understands his world well enough to know that one resolved threat is not the same as an absence of threat, There are always others. There are always people watching the edges of a powerful man's life, looking for the soft places. And she and Eli are visible now in a way they were not before, which means they are exposed in a way they were not before. He moves them. Not dramatically. There is no sudden convoy, no compound, no sweeping reconfiguration of their lives presented as a fait accompli. He does it the way he seems to do most things now, which is patiently and without drawing attention to it. Over the course of a month, piece by piece, their situation improves. A better apartment in a building with better bones and better locks, in a neighborhood where she can walk to the park without the low-grade vigilance she'd grown so accustomed to she'd stopped noticing it. A car and driver, available, present, never intrusive. Security she doesn't have to see to know is there, arranged at a distance that respects the life she is living rather than enclosing it. She lets him do it. She lets him because Eli deserves to be safe, and because she is tired in the specific way that comes from years of being the only person standing between her child and everything, and because there is a version of being cared for that doesn't require you to surrender the person you became while you were learning to survive without it. That is the version she has been afraid didn't exist. That is the version she is beginning, carefully and without rushing, to believe this might be. She doesn't say this out loud. She's not ready to say it out loud, and she's not going to perform readiness she doesn't have. But she thinks it. At night, in the new apartment, with Eli asleep in the next room and the city quieter than she is used, too, she lets herself think it. She thinks, maybe. And for now, maybe is enough to build on. He tells her everything one night, not just Daijung, all of it. The full architecture of who he has been, the decisions that built him into the man she ran from, the things he chose and the things he told himself justified them, and the long, uncomfortable work of dismantling those justifications one by one. He doesn't arrange it to be flattering. He doesn't perform guilt or broker for her sympathy or position himself as a man already forgiven by his own suffering. He simply tells her the truth in the plain and deliberate way she has come to recognize as his most genuine register, and then he stops talking and lets her do what she wants with it. She listens to all of it without interrupting. The apartment is quiet around them. Eli is asleep. The city does its distant thing beyond the window, indifferent as always, and in here there are just the two of them and 5 years of accumulated weight and everything he has just set down on the table between them. She is quiet for a moment after he finishes. Then, I'm not going to pretend the things you've done don't exist. I'm not asking you to. I'm not going to pretend that what you're doing now erases them, that becoming a different person retroactively changes what the other person did. I know, he says. I know that. But I also, she says, and she slows down here, choosing the words with the care of someone who has thought about this for longer than tonight, I'm not going to pretend that the man I watch with my son every week is the same person as the man I ran from. Because he isn't. I know the difference. I've spent my whole life learning to see people clearly, and I'm not going to stop trusting that now just because the conclusion is inconvenient. He looks at her. She looks back, steady, the way she has always been steady, the particular steadiness of someone who came by it the hard way, who had to build it herself from nothing, and who therefore knows exactly how load-bearing it is. I fell in love with you, she says, a long time ago, when I was young enough that I could almost blame it on that, and also old enough that I knew exactly what I was walking toward and walked toward it anyway. Something in her expression shifts, not softening exactly, but opening, the way a room opens when a window is finally raised. I tried to stop. When I left, I was so certain that distance would be sufficient, that if I put enough cities between us, the feeling would eventually run out of something to live on. A brief pause. It helped for about a year. And then it was still there. It didn't go anywhere. It just waited. Nancy, I'm talking, she says. Let me finish. He closes his mouth. He waits. He is, she has learned, capable of extraordinary stillness when something matters enough. I want to try, she says. I need you to understand why, because the reasons matter to me even if they don't change the outcome. She holds his gaze and doesn't look away from it. Not because I need you. I don't. I have a job and an apartment and a son who is thriving, and I have proven, at length, that I am capable of building a life without you in it. That's not nothing to me. That's everything, actually, and I'm not setting it down." She pauses. "And not only because of Eli, though he is part of it, because of course he is, because he loves you and you love him, and that is real and it matters." The apartment holds its breath. "But because I have spent 5 years being brave about everything that frightened me," she says. "Every hard thing, every impossible month, every moment I didn't know how I was going to manage and managed anyway. I faced all of it. I didn't look away from any of it." She exhales slowly. "And this is the one thing I've been looking away from. This, specifically. And I think it's time to stop." She watches something happen in his face, something that moves through it like weather, like the particular relief of a man who has been holding himself very still for a very long time and has just been told he is allowed to move. He's across the room before she has finished the last word. He doesn't reach for her immediately. He stops close enough that she has to tilt her head to hold his eyes, close enough that she can see the steadiness he is working to maintain and the effort it costs him. His hands come up slowly, giving her time, the way he has given her time about everything, and when she doesn't step back, he cups her face with a gentleness that sits completely at odds with everything he is, and somehow doesn't, somehow makes total sense, somehow is the most him thing she has ever seen him do. "I'm not the same person either," she says quietly, looking up at him. "I need you to know that too. I'm not who I was. She's still in there, but she's not all of it." "I know," he says. "I can see her. I can see all of it." She believes him. That's the thing she didn't expect, not the feeling, which she had long ago stopped pretending wasn't there, but the believing him. The way it arrives, not as a decision she has to make, but as something that is simply, finally, true. Outside, the city continues its indifferent roar. Inside, something that has been running for 5 years goes still. They tell Eli on a Sunday, sitting on the apartment floor, in the careful and honest way of two people who have agreed that their son deserves the truth, delivered gently and without omission. They have talked about how to do this. They have thought about it. They sit across from him with the seriousness of people who understand that this moment will live in him somewhere, always, and who want to get it right. Eli listens with his hands in his lap and his face arranged in the particular expression he gets when he is paying close attention, solemn, focused, older-looking than 4. He does not interrupt. When they finish, he is quiet for a long moment, looking at the floor, processing in whatever way Eli processes things, which has always been his own. Then he looks up at Jae-won. "So, you're my dad?" "Yes," Jae-won says, "and you're going to be around all the time now. As much as you want me to be." Eli nods slowly, absorbing this, turning it over. Another pause. The apartment waits. "Can I have the top bunk?" he asks. Nancy laughs. It comes out of her fully formed and unguarded real laughter, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind she had forgotten lived in her body, that she had misplaced somewhere in 5 years of keeping herself together by sheer force of will. It fills the room completely. Jae-won looks at her. Something in his face goes quiet in a way she has never seen before on him. Not the controlled stillness he wears in the world, but something underneath it, something undefended, the look of a man who has just seen the one thing he has no armor against and has understood, in the same moment, that he doesn't want any. Eli takes their silence as assent on the bunk bed question and moves on with his day. Suyeon meets Nancy for the first time 3 weeks later and announces, within 20 minutes, and with the confidence of someone who has already made up her mind, that she has always wanted a sister. She says it directly to Nancy, bypassing any diplomatic preamble, and then moves immediately to asking Eli what his favorite dinosaur is, which earns her a loyalty that will apparently now be unconditional and lifelong. Madame O comes for dinner. The first of many dinners, strained at first, formal in the way of people navigating new and complicated territory with their dignity intact, and then gradually, incrementally, something else. She spends the first evening watching Eli with an expression she does not intend anyone to see. The expression of a woman encountering something she didn't know she needed, arriving late and with some humility. Nancy notices. She notices, and she files it carefully, and she thinks, not yet, but eventually, in her own time, there may be room for something there. She does not rush toward it. She does not close the door on it either. She has learned this year to leave certain doors open. She does not become someone else. This was never the trade. She keeps her job. She is good at it, and it is hers, and she does not set down the things she built herself. She keeps the old apartment's address saved in her phone, not as a wound to press, but as a coordinate. A reminder of where she stood and how far she carried them, and the fact that she did it, that it was her, that it will always have been her. Some knowledge you earn at too high a cost to relinquish. She keeps the habit of knowing where the exits are. She suspects she always will. There are things that become part of how you move through the world, installed by years you can't undo, and she has made her peace with carrying them. They are part of her. She is not interested in a version of healing that requires her to pretend otherwise, but she also, slowly and without ceremony, lets herself be loved in the way she always deserved, not kept in a separate drawer, not a secret life running parallel to the real one. The actual point of the story, present, acknowledged, chosen in the open. Jae-won does not make grand gestures. He is not built for them, and she would not trust them if he tried. What he does is show up, quietly, without announcement, with a consistency that does not waver and does not require her gratitude to sustain itself. He shows up with the right cereal. He shows up for school drop-off, standing on the pavement outside Eli's classroom in the mornings looking slightly too formidable for the setting and not caring at all. He sits on floors. He keeps his appointments with his therapist every 2 weeks without fail. He takes the empire he built across 20 years of ruthless and deliberate accumulation, and he chips at it, reshapes it, files down the edges that cut, not all at once, not perfectly, but persistently, in the direction of something his family can stand beside without flinching. It is not a perfect life. It was never going to be a perfect life, and she is old enough and clear-eyed enough to find that more comforting than its alternative. It is loud and layered and cross-cultural and occasionally involves Eli informing Jae-won's associates with complete seriousness that his dad doesn't like it when people are mean. It involves two families learning the geometry of sharing space and an aunt whose calls Nancy doesn't return and a city that doesn't know what to make of any of them and is going to have to figure it out. It involves a woman who ran and a man who looked and a small boy who stood in the rain with his chin tilted up, holding a paper cup just in case, waiting for his mother with the patience of someone who has always known she would come back, who looked up at the right moment and changed everything. It is not perfect. It is theirs, built from a misunderstood moment and 5 years of surviving in separate silences and one ordinary Tuesday in November when the ground shifted and everything that was supposed to happen finally began. It is, without question, enough.